Welcome to another edition of Inside Look. It's our semi-annual visit with the North Attleboro Superintendent of Schools, Dr. John Antonucci. I never call you doctor.
No need to.
I don't think many people do, right?
Yeah, I don't even call myself doctor.
Dr. John Antonucci. We are sitting just outside your office in your conference room on Monday, February 13th. I guess right about halfway through the year. How's the year gone so far?
Yeah, great is a short answer. Yeah, we're beyond the halfway point. I think we had the 100th day of school last week. You know, we have 180 school days, and it's been great. I mean, students are working hard, staff's working hard, a lot of energy in the district. You know, I can't believe we're still talking about the pandemic after 3 years, but it did take a while for people to kind of get their muscle memory back for what it was like to be in school. And this year you can just see a palpable difference, just fantastic energy and enthusiasm, and really back to normal. And I think that's the best thing I could say.
Jared Ware is behind the camera. He's back here at North TV. We were talking just a few moments ago. Enrichment programs are starting to come back. Certainly disappeared for good reason during COVID, but picking up again. Things starting to look like normal.
Yeah. A lot of restrictions during COVID for obvious reasons. But things like enrichment programs, people coming into the schools. And also people and our students going out on field trips and that type of thing. So it's really nice to see that. That's such an important part of a student's educational experience. That to not have that for a couple of years really was a detriment. So to have it back is it's really exciting. And again, back to relatively speaking normal kind of school.
I know Jared's going to be very busy. The students, I believe it's the third grade students, attend the Little Red Schoolhouse for a day, get a chance to see what it was like back during colonial times. Have you ever been there?
I have not, and it's definitely on my list to get there this year. I don't know how I missed it last year, so I'm definitely anxious to see that. It's really nice to have that in our community, and just to give the kids a glimpse into the history of North Attleboro. The history of the community is, I think, really important, and by every account, people love that field trip. So I'm looking forward to getting up there this year.
Let's talk budget. You're more than midway through the budget year. Actually, you're almost 8 months, 2/3 through the budget year. Budget holding steady this fiscal year?
Oh yeah, this fiscal year we're totally on track. I mean, quite frankly, we have to be. I mean, there's really not much. You can't really end the year in a deficit, but we're actually in pretty good shape, and I expect to end the year strong and for the most part accomplish what we set off to accomplish when the budget was originally developed, over a year ago.
The challenge is next fiscal year. I saw you announce at the last school committee meeting, February 6th school committee meeting, that due to COVID money no longer coming from the federal government, up to 13 positions may be eliminated. Yeah,
and that was something we knew was coming. I mean, the COVID money, we call it ESSER. It's it's a short acronym for a long name, but ESSER came in 3 waves to every district throughout the Commonwealth, and North Attleboro was the beneficiary of some kind of a really robust grant. But all the positions that we hired with the ESSER money, we knew were going to be temporary. And so we really have one full fiscal year left, fiscal year 24, which is next year, to spend that money. And so unfortunately, a lot of the positions that we hired on a temporary basis, we have to eliminate. We just don't have additional funding to be able to backfill the loss of that grant. Specifically, we hired what we call intervention specialist teachers, and then intervention specialist paraprofessionals. In next year's budget, we had to eliminate the paraprofessionals, again, all part of the plan originally, and then we have the intervention teachers for 1 more year. In those positions, they were intended to provide post-pandemic support, kind of direct service to students who might need a little boost after the pandemic. So we were grateful to have them, and it's really unfortunate, but they were temporary, and we're starting to see them fall off out of the operating budget.
I know that was part of it. Special education. These are students going outside the district that the district has to pay for?
Yep. So every district in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has students that are educated with either private special education schools or sometimes collaboratives, which are kind of quasi-public agencies that provide special ed support. Really difficult situation this year in the state. There's a state agency called the Operational Services Division that sets private school tuition rates on an annual basis. And historically, they've been reasonable increases, what you might expect, 1%, 2%, 3% at most over the years. This year, they set the private special ed tuition rate for fiscal year 24 at 14% increase over FY23. It's a devastating impact to school budgets. For North Attleboro alone, we're almost $500,000 year over year increase, mostly attributable to that 14% increase. It's the subject of a lot of discussion and debate and anxiety, quite frankly, all around the state. And there's some pretty intense lobbying efforts to go back to the state and say, hey, listen, if you're going to keep that 14% increase, that's fine, but you need to somehow backfill that and help districts. So
Well, it's not as if the state doesn't have any money.
Right. I mean, that's the irony is they're sitting on a lot of cash, and many taxpayers in Massachusetts have been the beneficiary of rebates, and all of a sudden now to get this really kind of off the wall, out of the blue 14% increase, it just really doesn't make any sense. So that's a big hit for us. It really is. And so that really cannibalizes other parts of the budget. And quite frankly, we're not getting any additional services out of it. So it just makes it harder to swallow.
Jared, as I mentioned, is back. He covered the February 6th school committee meeting. I saw him on February 7th. I said, how was the meeting?
Yeah.
And he said, pretty much talking about the same things they were back in August. One of them is the boat refield, but there's been a lot of progress made since August.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the reasons we do talk about it every meeting, and that's because I'm really committed to kind of a high level of transparency for all of our work, and that's that field is something that people are very interested in. So yeah, we're making great progress. The track is, for the most part, done. We've talked about this before. There's one final piece that we have to attend to in the spring on the track surface. The bleachers are home and visitor bleachers and press box are up. They look fabulous. I think you've been out there. Yeah. It really helped the project come together. And we just opened bids a week and a half ago for the third major component of that project, which is the bathroom and concession building that we're set to build. We're still analyzing those bids. We haven't awarded a contract yet, but we're hopeful to move that forward this spring. And like I said, it's really coming together. It looks fantastic, and it's been a long time coming. But the reality is, and I reminded the school committee about this last meeting, we just got the funding to do this project last June. So it's a pretty significant project. You've been out to the field. You saw the scope and scale of that work.
Well, what people don't realize is it wasn't just a matter of, okay, that's where the old stands were on the home side, visitor side, let's just start putting stands in. Because, especially on the home side, it's built on a severe hill, very steep hill, even a hill on the visitor side as well. Very steep on the home, slight slope on the visitors. Retaining walls had to be built.
Yeah, massive retaining walls. And in fact, on the home side, the retaining wall, I believe, was 7 or 8 foot tall, if you can picture that, which required just a lot of site work, a lot of fill. All of that work is geared towards making sure the site is handicap accessible, something it has never been. It is not only the law, but it's also kind of our obligation to make sure that we, residents and fans with disabilities can attend our games and use our facilities. So a lot of that site work had to do with making that handicap accessible. And so the field will be fully accessible when it's complete.
You mentioned the concession stand, the restroom facilities. The state has what I consider a ridiculous number when it comes to restrooms. So many toilets for so many seats, and let's face it, with the exception of every other year on Thanksgiving Day, not every seat is filled. Can the town get a waiver so they don't have to for example, put in 50 toilets?
So yeah, that you're referring to basically state plumbing code, and the state plumbing code doesn't differentiate between Gillette Stadium, for example, and Beaupre Field, right? And so it's the code has really, in my opinion, unreasonable amount of toilet and lavatory sinks that you have to put in. It just doesn't make sense based on our population. So yes, we can get a waiver, and we did get a waiver,
Okay, good.
which really cut the number in half. But even half is an extraordinarily high number for the number of seats we actually have and the amount of times you actually need it. Nonetheless, it's the code. And so we had no choice but to follow the rules. We're happy to get the waiver, but it's still a pretty expensive proposition given the number of toilets that we're required to have. So we're following the rules.
Estimate, you haven't opened the bid yet. Estimate, what do you think it's going to cost?
Were you talking the concession
Concession
building?
/ bathrooms.
Yeah, well, I don't want to really put a number
Okay.
out there, but roughly in the $1.5 million range, if not a little
Because what's
more.
amazing, and I speak to a lot of old timers in this town, the townies, and I can't believe that's going to cost so much money. They built Schaefer Stadium for $6.3 million, and then I say, yeah, that was 51 years ago.
Right.
Things have gone up. They've even gone up in the last 12 months.
It's outrageous, and but yeah, you just have to kind of take a step back and realize what you're saying, right? And 50 years is a long time, and inflation and construction costs have gone up. If you've done a home project, you know that, right? I mean, you could spend $100,000 on a kitchen in a blink of an eye. So, in public jobs, we have it a little worse, if you will, because we also have to comply with state and federal procurement laws, as well as pay union wages, what's called prevailing wages for work. So it is more expensive for a public entity to build a building because we have to pay prevailing wages. I built a high school in Westwood back in 2005. Beautiful building, 180,000 square
Been in
feet.
there. Very nice.
It was $44 million, and we thought that was high then. That high school today would probably cost 150 to 200 million. Times do change. It's a tough pill to swallow, but it's just the market.
Certainly is. My comeback to those people, by the way, is, yeah, and what were you paying for gas? 19 cents a gallon?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I also would say, let me just say too, I mean, no one wants to spend.
No.
I mean, I've never met anybody, me included, by the way, who wants to pay taxes or wants to pay higher bills. But we're trying to do things right around here. We have to follow rules. We have to follow laws. We really employ, I think, really solid business practices. At the end of the day, we're just laying it out for the community, trying to be as transparent as possible, trying to be upfront as possible. And at the end of the day, it's going to be a community's decision whether or not they want to proceed with certain projects. But we're just trying to shoot straight and make sure that people have the information that's accurate and realistic.
What was the company, their slogan was, you can pay me now or you can pay me later. You haven't been around North Attleboro as long as I have. And North Attleboro has a reputation of, well, let's cut some corners here to save money. And in the end, you end up paying more. So what I noticed with you, I can't believe I can't remember the town manager.
Mike Borg, yeah.
Mike Borg. The town is doing things right.
Yeah.
Doing it right. And in the long run, it's going to save so much money.
Yeah, and the town manager and I talk about this all the time. And to me, I don't really know how to do business any other way. But I said this publicly, and I don't mean to be smart, I'm kind of a smart aleck when I say this, but we can do things cheap or we can do them right? But those are two different things. And so what we're going to do is just lay things out in the most professional, realistic, and transparent way possible. But we're going to lay out what is the right way to do it. And again, at the end of the day, and we're going to engage the community every step of the way, especially for some of these major projects. If the community chooses to go a different direction, I respect that. But we need to do things professionally, accurately, transparently, and right.
And please, if you're watching, don't tell Mike Borg. Couldn't remember his name. It's the Monday after the Super Bowl. Okay,
early.
I can be forgiven. The biggest project on the horizon is what to do with the high school.
Yeah.
I think that's the important way to phrase it. What to do with the high school, and that is what I believe a feasibility study is for. I asked Mike Borg this question, and I'm going to ask it of you because people probably haven't seen that interview if they watch the education channel. $2 million. What do you get for $2 million? Sounds like a lot of money.
Yeah, well, I want to be clear about a couple things. That $2 million that we're looking for is simply an authorization. It's not the bill.
Okay.
It's not necessarily the final price. That being said, though, that authorization we're seeking comes from information that we've gleaned from other districts, right? Talking about doing things right. So we've talked to the MSBA, we've done the research on recent projects, we've talked to colleagues, I've talked to owners, project managers, and architects to try to come to like a realistic number, like what should we be going for a project this size. The $2 million is probably a pretty high-end authorization, but it's, again, we wanted to do it right up front, so we didn't have to go back in the future. So that's where the number comes from. We didn't pull it out of thin air. It comes from true research and people's professional opinions. A feasibility study is about a year and a half plus or minus process where we'll have an owner's project manager and an architect do the deepest dive possible into North Attleboro High School to determine what the building needs to sustain itself for the next 50 years, what the options are, and very importantly, what is feasible, hence the term, for the town of North Attleboro, right? So it is a multi-layered, intensive, again, year and a half long process. We're all going to work together to try to answer those questions. But it's a significant cost because you have professional architects and engineers and project managers doing that work. We don't know how to do it otherwise. I mean, you have to do that work. That money buys you, there's two components, feasibility study and then schematic design. Schematic design is, I forget the exact percentage, maybe 20% or 30% of what a final design would be for a project. But that's going to articulate the scope of the project, let's say scope, scale, and a budget, okay? And at the end of schematic design, we'll have a number to take to the town to say, here's the option that that we're recommending based on all this year and a half study. Here's what we're buying. Maybe it's a renovation, maybe it's a new building, maybe it's a combination, renovation, expansion. And here's the budget. And town of North Attleboro, do you want to authorize funding to do that work? It is a massive project, and it warrants professionals doing that work. So yeah, it's a big number, but there's really no other way to do it. And I want to be crystal clear when I say this, and I said this to town council last week, it's not an option. If we want to engage with MSBA, meaning do we want to participate in this state-funded grant program, a reimbursement program for our school building project, they require the feasibility study and schematic design. So if we choose not to do it at this point, the project's effectively over, as we know it. So it's not an option. It's also a tried and true practice. There hasn't been a building project built in the last 40 years in Massachusetts without doing this stage. So it might be new to people, but it's not a new process, and it's of critical importance, and it's really exciting too. And we're going to get some help to determine what is the right thing to do. It's really premature to talk about that before you do that work. Does that make sense? Everything I just said?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
does make sense.
Yeah.
Tri-County, Karen McGuire. I don't know if you guys talked about.
Of course, yeah.
Are you guys competitors for students?
No, I mean, maybe naturally,
Because
but,
I noticed they now visit middle schools, and they send students trying to get kids to come to Tri-County, and I think to myself, geez, for every kid that goes to Tri-County, that's money North Attleboro's losing to educate the kids at North Attleboro High School.
Yeah.
That being said, they are probably a year, year and a half ahead of you in the design stage. I think they came up with renovated, expanded school, ballpark 285, new school 300 million. With a third of the students at Tri-County coming from North Attleboro, that could be a $50 million hit to taxpayers. Does that hurt your chances to take care of your own school?
Yeah, the short answer, I don't know. I mean, it's certainly it's a factor. It's a subject of a lot of questions that we have. The town manager and I talk about it all the time. I want to back up though and just say Tri-County is an amazing school. The vocational technical schools in Massachusetts are among the best in the country. And even though they sort of compete for dollars, the students who are going there, they're North Attleboro residents.
Yeah.
So they're kind of collectively all of our kids. They just don't happen to come to North Attleboro High School. The issue for us is the number of kids, and you referenced a third. So we send roughly 250 North Attleboro residents, students, to Tri-County, which is it's been higher in history, and I don't know why it got so high, 20, 30, however many years ago, but when they do a school construction project, if they do a school construction project, they have to assess their communities, their sending communities, right? And since we have a large portion of the students, our assessment's going to be high. It's going to be significant. So yeah, I mean, it definitely has the chance to it certainly cannibalizes the budget, and it certainly could jeopardize our project only because we need to make sure we have enough money to do both, right? So it's something that we wrestle with. We're talking to our state legislators about. I don't know if there's a workaround. It's just a function of where we are as a community. Again, it's like many things in a community, it's 40 years in the making. The number of kids we send there, the number of kids we send there.
People ask me this, and I really don't know the explanation other than they can't. But people say, okay, North Attleboro's looking at a new high school. Why don't they build a vocational side to the new high school, kind of like an Attleboro high school, and then that will save all the money we're sending to Tri-County? The town can't do that. Aren't they in some kind of an agreement over so many years that they can't compete against Tri-County?
Yeah, well, there's something in the state called the Chapter 74 approved program, which is basically a vocational program, and so North Attleboro, Attleboro, I believe, has a Chapter 74 designation. I could be wrong about that. Certainly, Tri-County is providing state-approved vocational technical education to students. We don't have that designation. So because we have the opportunity to send students to Tri-County, the state wouldn't necessarily approve North Attleboro to run competitor programs. We can run, I think we do need to do a better job as we move forward, whether we stay in our existing high school, whether we have a renovated or expanded program, to give kids more career and technical education, more authentic learning experiences, more hands-on practical experience. You can do that without being in direct competition to, for example, an automotive shop or a cosmetology shop. We can certainly do a better job as a community giving kids programs like that might incentivize them to stay in North Attleboro instead of going to a full vocational program. So that's going to come out. It's interesting in even the work we do in the next year and a half with our feasibility study. We have to do a comprehensive educational plan looking well into the future about what kind of education we want to provide our students. Because the state wants us to do that. They make us do that to make sure that we're building a building that's going to sustain us for the next 5 decades.
Once again, the people who want to do that, and your suggestion, that costs money.
Yep, right.
It costs money, and keep that in mind when the feasibility study is done.
Right.
We have about 4 minutes left. Is there anything that, I've led the direction of this discussion. Is there anything specifically you want to talk about?
No, I'll just tell you we have a lot of changes in personnel that I think are worth mentioning, because some pretty high profile ones. But we, this week is the last week where the principal of the Falls Schools, Leanne Todd, will be working. She's retiring effective this Friday. And Leanne has given 35 years to the North Attleboro community. She's really an icon of the North Attleboro Public Schools, and we certainly wish her well. But that leaves an opening. So we actually just appointed an interim principal, a person by the name of Donna Brown, who's going to finish the year for us, work from February 27th to June 15th. But then last week we advertised for the permanent replacement. We'll be doing that search this spring. So that's kind of a big thing. We also have our facilities director left the district mid-year. And we have an interim in place there as well. Ernie Sandlin, who's a North Attleboro resident, who's one of the most talented facilities directors in the Commonwealth. So he's doing a great job for us now. But that's something that we need to replace this spring too. And the town manager and I and the school committee and the town council are having conversations about maybe joining forces and having a joint school and town facilities director position. And it could provide some economy of scale and allow someone to kind of look over things with a little more 10,000-foot view and provide some vision and strategic planning and work for our facilities, which are a really important part of our operation. So we kind of have a lot going on, actually, in the personnel realm, but it's all part of the job and exciting, hard work, but exciting nonetheless.
How often do you wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning and start thinking about work?
Is every day too strong of an answer? It's these jobs, they are what they are. I've been doing it a long time. You take it home with you, every day and night. But at the end of the day, we're doing good work, for the students in North Attleboro. So it makes it all worthwhile. And when we have time for a weekend or maybe a vacation, we take advantage of that. But same thing goes to the town manager. Running a town and running a school district, it's intense. There's a lot of demands from the community, but there's really no better work. So we're happy to do it.
Sense of pride, fulfillment when you're sitting on the stage on graduation day?
Oh, it's the best day of the year. I mean, everything. It's the culmination, right? And of most students, 12 years of education if they started in kindergarten, sometimes 13 if they've started in our preschool. And especially in a town like North Attleboro, just a sense of pride and tradition that you sense, especially at like a ceremony like that. I mean, it's palpable. And so, it makes you feel great that everything you do, makes it all worthwhile. So, couldn't be happier.
Dr. John Antonucci, your superintendent of schools. We'll be back in August. The air conditioning hopefully will be on in August for our semi-annual chat. Thank you for watching.